and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. From Escape Collective, I'm Dane Cash, and I'm here with bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano. Cosmo, we're here to talk about San Sebastián. We're here to talk about the upcoming Tour de France Femmes, other things going on around the league. Are you excited?
I'm excited.
How was your weekend? Did you enjoy the last few days of the Olympics?
I did. I used to run track in high school, so it's really fun to watch the best sprinters in the world be awful at the most straightforward and heavily practiced thing among high school athletes, which is baton passing.
Oh, the relay, yes.
Yes.
Well, the Americans were bad at it, I think is what you're saying. Yeah.
There were other teams that weren't great. The Americans, maybe the American men's team in the 4x4 probably, well, the 4x1, sorry. Yeah, the American men's team, the 4x1 was real bad. And they were bad in the prelims too. So anyway, I may have more thoughts on the Olympic coverage at some point in the future, but no, I had a good time watching the Olympics, but I think I had a better time watching Donostia Klasikoa. Am I saying that correctly?
Donostia. Yeah, so we should say to listeners who don't know this, the race that we generally call the Clásica San Sebastián, which is its Spanish name, Castilian name, is officially the Donostia San Sebastián Klasikoa, which is a Basque, sort of a hybrid name between Basque and Spanish, much like how the race commonly called the Vuelta al País Vasco, or even the Tour du Pays Basque, because that's the French name, is actually officially the Itzulia Basque country, using the Basque name. Yeah, the Klasikoa this weekend was very entertaining. We got to see a rider take a win that we hadn't seen do so in a little while. A rider we've talked about extensively, relatively recently even on this show. And yeah, it was a great race, and it honestly usually is San Sebastián. It's a great race. Riders coming in with the Tour de France form. Most of them, some of them, some of them not
over Tour de France, maybe.
Yeah, some of them, including one who has won multiple Tours de France, just didn't quite look at his best. But we'll get to that in a bit. Let's just start with the headline. Cosmo, what's the headline from the Clásica San Sebastián 2024?
Mark Hirschi evades Alaphilippe in the closing meters and successfully wins a race.
I don't know that would hit our character limit, but that is a very accurate
that's a little word.
Description.
UAE, as much as it was a Mark Hirschi win, it was a UAE win. I think they played it really well. But every time I see Alaphilippe and Hirschi together, I think back to 2019, 2020 Liège finish, which was perhaps the most spectacular loss in the history of professional cycling, for a variety of reasons. But Alaphilippe bumped into Mark Hirschi, basically preventing him from winning Liège. And that didn't happen this time.
Primož Roglič won.
Primož Roglič did win.
Yes.
In part because after preventing Mark Hirschi from winning, Alaphilippe celebrated a good 20 meters from the line.
And was relegated.
Yes. So. Yeah. Well, I mean, he lost it multiple times.
He lost it multiple ways. Yes. But there they were back at it at the Clásica San Sebastián. So how was it won? Take us from before they were off the front together. How did it happen?
Well, this is old timey bike race watching. So we did not get a full stage. The cameras came on around 68K to go, and the break was sort of disintegrating with EF's Simon Carr up the road. You looked like Visma Lease Bike had been doing a lot of chasing. They kind of brought Simon Carr back towards the top of the penultimate climb, and we saw Alaphilippe take a flyer. Not super convincingly. He got some space, but he didn't seem fully committed, especially not when Pavel Sivakov from UAE kind of counterattacked. Alaphilippe sat on his wheel for like a kilometer and then was like, no, I don't want to go this fast. Dropped back to the main group. Sivakov rode more or less solo to the foot of the last climb, around 10K to go. And this whole time, despite the fact that UAE had 4 riders in a group of 20-ish behind them, it was a lot of destiny doing the work because they had 3 riders. Indeed. And Sivakov was up the road. And Visma wasn't going to do anything because Kuss was in the group behind this group. Vinigo had been dropped almost at the moment Alaphilippe attacked. It was pretty. He was never really in the picture, so it fell to this kind of lower tier team. They did a pretty good job chasing, but coming into the final climb, Leonard van Eetveld was kind of towards the back of this chase group, and that's sort of threw things off for him. He definitely had a lot of work to make up over the course of the climb, as other favorites like Alaphilippe and Brandon McNulty was kind of doing teamwork for Hirschi, I think. Yeah, so a group of 5 kind of got separation from this larger chase group right after Sivakov was caught, but didn't really get away. And Van Aert kind of dragged his way up to it. And then right after a really narrow section of road, lots of fans, Alaphilippe put in an attack, kind of dropped everybody except Mark Hirschi, who stayed on his wheel. They rode together into the finish, almost crashed each other out on the descent. Just kind of typical Alaphilippe space cadetting. Came into the finish with, I think, probably 20 seconds over Van Aertveld, the kind of a solo pursuer. And it didn't get as cagey as it could have in that kind of scenario. Alaphilippe was leading out, but he didn't really, fully get off the gas, be like, hey, I'm going to sit here and let this guy catch us if you don't lead out. They did take pulls pretty evenly to the final K, but right around 150 meters, pretty close to the line, you kind of saw Alaphilippe falling into this pattern of looking ahead, looking back, looking ahead, looking back. And I think Hirschi noticed this because he let a little gap open as Alaphilippe was looking back, and then as he looked ahead, Hirschi went straight for Alaphilippe's wheel, caught the draft for a split second, came off it. Alaphilippe is looking back, noticing Hirschi there. Hirschi's already up to speed, and honestly, he looked faster all the way to the finish.
Yeah.
So
I thought that Hirschi did a really good job of playing Alaphilippe to put him into the front at the right moment. I mean, that's always such an important thing when you're coming into a finish like that. You don't want to be the one on the front, obviously. People will tell you that it's better to have a lead out, but I think both of these riders are fast. These are good, fast finishers. Yep. And I think you want to not be the one on the front if you're one of these 2 riders. And I think Hirschi did a great job to be in the best position. And then, to time it perfectly, all around, just did a great finish there. I wanted to go back a little bit, kind of go back. But basically, after the race, Hirschi pointed out, he said that if it hadn't been for Lotto, Sivakov probably would have won. And it's an interesting fact interesting perspective that a rider from the super team that is UAE was so helped out by Lotto in the work that they did.
I get where he's coming from. I know why he's saying it. I don't know if I agree, just because that final climb is so steep. It is it is, you're standing still if you're not fighting for the win, right? Like
it's a 10% grade for those who don't know.
Sivakov like extended 10-11%. Like there's a 27% section. And Sivakov was minutes down, wasn't he, in the final accounting? Obviously, like once his teammates are past him, he had 3 teammates past him at one point. Yeah, why would he chase? Yeah. But still, it would be really hard to hang on for that distance. I agree that Lotto really made the race play out in a more predictable fashion, made it play out the way it did. I am not entirely sure Sivakov was going to solo away to victory if Lotto sits up. And I mean, it's possible everyone else in the group would have been like, well, I'm not working. But I think at some point, someone would have been like, hey, we can probably win that. We've got somebody who can go fast with this climb. Let's do it.
And to be fair to Lotto, either way, we should point out that for listeners who maybe are they know the name Lennart van Eetveld, but they're thinking, I've heard of him, but he's a talent. He is an extremely promising young rider who won the UAE Tour earlier this year, a race where he beat some pretty good names. And this is a rider that Lotto is right to work hard for him. And maybe had he been in a better position, I don't know that he would have been able to do anything. But there's a reason that Lotto did this hard work, and he did still end up on the podium, by the way.
Yep.
First big World Tour one-day podium for him, I believe. So it makes sense that Van Eetveld would have been giving this much support from his team, but it was instead UAE and Soudal that benefited. I thought it was really interesting just watching these 2 riders come in, Hirschi and Alaphilippe. These are both riders who, by all accounts, according to everything we're reading, are not going to be on their teams next year. Two riders who are at the end of their contracts, or they're going to be heading out somewhere else. Patrick Lefevre just said in the media the other day that Alaphilippe will not be back in the coming year, and we've seen lots of talk about Mark Hirschi heading on. His contract is up as well, possibly heading on to Tudor Pro Cycling, which is the team that is
that would be interesting.
It's a Swiss team, and his close ties to Fabian Cancellara. It just makes sense. So interesting to see these 2 riders who have a lot of reason, a lot of maybe even need to do well to up their price.
It was interesting to see in the finale, Alaphilippe at one point was like, I mean, it's Alaphilippe, so he's always gesticulating, but he it seemed like he was trying to shout to the camera to let the team car know that his radio wasn't working or that something was wrong, which is interesting and maybe kind of emblematic of how things are going with his tenure at Quick-Step, at Soudal Quick-Step these days.
And it's funny just because he's been so pivotal to their success over the past few years. He was a standard bearer for this team. And then, there was a 3-year stretch where he just suddenly wasn't. Things just weren't working out. And he really has kind of found it again this year. In this contract year, he obviously won a stage at the Giro d'Italia, and I think he's shown us that his form is, if not back at where it was when he was winning world championships, certainly he's a rider to be reckoned with.
I agree. I think he looked really strong. I think he also looked a little lost out there. Like the times you said that Hershey played him in the sprint, and I think you're pretty correct about that. But I think to a certain extent, Alaphilippe played himself, right? I mean, he was making moves at 50K to go, practically 43K to go. That's none of the other favorites were involved in that. And he even coming up the final climb, he was kind of the first one to make attacks. There was a lot of time where he was just on the front of the group, kind of pushing, looking over his shoulder. It seemed like he was doing a lot more work than he needed to do. And
yeah,
that is no way to beat someone who is also fast in a 2-up sprint, right? I think if he'd ridden a little smarter, if he had the team support, half the team support that UAE had, we would have seen a much more competitive finish at the end of today.
I actually was, all that said, very impressed by Hershey's sprint. He's fast. I do think, however, that Julian Alaphilippe has consistently shown us over and over again that he's very fast. And I think in a vacuum, if you just said one day, hey, who wins the sprint between Alaphilippe and Mark Hershey, I would say generally Alaphilippe. So I was very impressed with Hershey's ability to do that. Maybe it says something about Alaphilippe maybe losing a step. I don't know. He is 32, and yeah, we've said he is not what he once was. But yeah, maybe Hershey's getting a little better at that.
I would love to see Alaphilippe kind of get to a less tense working environment and maybe get a little more guidance. Just because I think when he was at his best, when he was the unstoppable rider who would go hard and the rest of the peloton would throw up their arms and be like, there's nothing that can be done about this. He really rode on just instinct and verve, like an excited child, like a kid who is in a playground and he's running around pretty hard and he sees a new slide or something. He's super excited and he runs extra hard. And he was strong enough that he could win races like that. And I think he's still strong enough to win races, but he's got to go to the playground with a plan and an attentive parent so that he doesn't, tire himself out running up the slide and then realize that, oh wait, this other slide is really where the race is going to be decided.
And what he has instead is a parent who goes on the news and talks about how his kid is overpaid. About him. So it's rough. And maybe things will be different if he finds greener pastures. In any case, second is still good. But Mark Hershey, we should talk about him for a bit, because I feel like with Mark Hershey, the big storyline is and has been now for quite some time. Remember when he seemed so good in 2020? What happened? The funny thing is he's still only, 25. He turns 26 in a couple of weeks here. He's at the age where in any other time until the era of Tadej Pogačar, we would think now is the time where he's coming into his own. But he did do so many things so young. He won Flèche Wallonne back in 2020, that same year that he was so close at Liège. He won a stage at the Tour de France that year. He had not won a World Tour race since then, since 2020. He went to UAE, and things just didn't click there at UAE. So for him to finally get this big win, I'm sure it's a big relief for him. And I think it's also shows a trend of this year, because we saw him be, just in general, he was much more of a contender. Basically, the second half of last year, through the many non-World Tour races that he did, up until now, he's been much better than he had been for that stretch. And this is finally his chance to take that big win. And as evidence of how good he was kind of under the surface, I did a story last week for Escape on the big names of the transfer market and did some digging on who was ranked where, basically, and just wanted to get a sense of what were the highly ranked riders that were going to be on the move. And even before his San Sebastián win, Mark Hershey was the 5th ranked rider in Pro Cycling Stats points, which is incredible. But that just goes to show you how much he's been doing kind of behind the scenes, off the radar, not in the World Tour races. But he's been bubbling under the surface. This is finally his chance to get a win that actually people are going to see. Yes, it's not a Grand Tour stage or classic of Liège-Bastogne, Liège caliber, but big enough that I think people are going to finally start to say, okay, maybe Mark Hershey does still have that bright future that we once thought he might have. Anybody else surprise you or maybe disappoint you in the race?
Kevin Vermarka, the U.S. kid, the 23-year-old from the
three of
U.S.
us. I say us like, I'm one of them. There were 3 Americans in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good ride. DSM is not, they're not having a banner year. I wouldn't say it's been terrible, but he was up there in the mix on the steepest part of the stage. Like, can't hate.
Yeah. He was there 4th. Paulus, former winner of the race, was 6th, and Brandon McNulty 10th. Mike Woods 8th. So there were 4 North Americans in the top 10. And meanwhile, as you pointed out, Jonas Vingegaard dropped relatively early in the race, which I was surprised by. I would have figured that Vingegaard would have gone in. To me, Vingegaard doesn't seem like somebody who's just going to show up. Like, I just assume if he's going, he's in good shape
or something.
Yeah. And this was going to come up again on this very show because he is not done racing this year. But yeah, he just didn't look like he just didn't have it. And maybe it's just interesting to see the way that the post-tour vibes affect people, because sometimes we see riders coming in off the tour and they're flying, and then other times, you see them get dropped, and who knows how it's going to affect this or that person.
We saw the same thing with Simon Yates too, like almost the same part of the course, like one of those just done, like you go to pedal, can't go hard, you're off the back. And it was it was really interesting to me to see how quickly after the tour, like, Tadej Pogačar canceled all future engagements. Like, nope, no, he needs to rest. And I think I don't know what the post-tour, recovery training planning is like for any of these other riders, but it may be, UAE saw numbers that were like, okay, this is where you need to stop racing bikes for a little bit and recover.
Right.
And maybe that message wasn't quite as clear for Visma and for Jaco Alula. I don't know. I definitely feel like this maybe would have been what we would have seen from Pogačar had he attempted to do anything for the foreseeable future.
There's a long history of riders coming off of the Tour and then winning San Sebastián, but maybe not the ones who won the Tour de France. Maybe it's the ones who are hunting stages at the Tour.
Mm-hmm.
Alaphilippe, when he won, because he's a former winner of San Sebastián, had raced the Tour that year, like he does almost every year, not every year. Nielsen Paulus had raced the Tour the year he did it. Remco Evenepoel was your winner 3 years out of the last 4, and obviously had not raced the Tour in any of those years because this was his Tour debut this year. But there's plenty of evidence that the riders can do the Tour and then come in hot to San Sebastián.
No, I wasn't. I was more saying like that assessment of what actually happens to you at a Tour de France, especially a modern Tour de France, considering how hard they're raced. Like, day-long broadcasts means day-long racing. Recovery is important. And I wouldn't be, we'll talk about it later in the show.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and then come back and talk about other things going on in the world of bikes. Okay, so San Sebastián was the World Tour race of the weekend. There was some non-World Tour racing going on as well. We won't do, a big breakdown of everything that happened, but we did notice some things, some key things that may be of interest. And Cosmo, you had mentioned one from the Arctic race of Norway.
The Uno X Tour.
We actually had
Uno X Land.
Some reportage from, by the way. So head over to Escape Collective to check out the stories from Johnny Long and Ian Treloar. What did you see at the Arctic race that was noteworthy?
I thought it was really cool how Magnus Kort, he's Danish, so I think it's Magnus. But anyway, he was simultaneously doing lead-outs for Kristoff to win stages, and then continuing at the end of the lead-out to pedal extremely hard to try and get points and seconds for the GC. He's the sort of rider who has a very long period of time in relative terms where he can go extremely hard. But still, it is, I think, really a testament to his commitment to the team's plan that he would foist this upon himself, and also to how well kind of Uno X works, that they were able to pull it off. They got 2 wins for Kristoff. They got the GC for Kort.
And a stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kort was 7th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st across the 4 stages of the race. And in those first 2, he helped Kristoff get the win. And like you said, just kind of kept pedaling. Why wouldn't you?
They were almost 1-2 on stage 2. I think they were 1-3.
Yeah, 1-3 on stage 2. And then Court was second on the next day. Uno X won 3 of the 4 stages. They won overall. Court took the points jersey as well. Yeah, heck of a race from them, and just a really good performance from Court, who it's just a great signing for Uno X. It just fits in so well with the team ethos, and yeah, clearly worked out in a race that I'm sure they want to do well in, being a team that's so focused on Scandinavian success. Meanwhile, so that's going on in Northern Europe. Over in Spain, before San Sebastián, we had the Vuelta a Burgos, where one Sepp Kuss returned to racing after a bit of a break post Dauphiné due to COVID. He had COVID and it took him a long time to recover. It apparently hit him pretty hard. That's why he ultimately was scratched from an expected Tour de France start. And I think, there's a lot of question marks around, is he gonna come into the Vuelta a España, his title defense in form? Where is he after his lengthy layoff? And what we learned at the Vuelta a Burgos is that he is in form after his lengthy layoff. He won the race, first of all. He won a stage as well, a hard climbing stage. And in the end, okay, look, the Vuelta a Burgos is a big race, but it's not a World Tour race. It's not the biggest of races. And the field is nothing, it's not Tirreno or Paris-Nice level field. But he still did win a race, a shorter than a week-long stage race, right before the Vuelta a España. There's not much else he could do to look better than he does, basically, Put it that way. He's checked the boxes.
It wasn't like he had, a full Visma train setting him up on top of the mountain. He had to do his own work, break up the group, and then make his winning attack. And I agreed. It wasn't like the super toughest test in the world, but it was a situation where he had to do well in the mountains and then hold on to the time trial. And he did. I think he had a pretty good TT after that. Also, Jay Vine, right? Didn't he win that TT?
Jay Vine won the TT, a very flat TT, so not Kuss's favored terrain, and he did fine, and Jay Vine did great. Yeah, so Kuss ahead of the Vuelta a España, looking about as good as he can. That's what was going on kind of around the league. What's coming up, though? The Tour de France Femmes is, well, by the time you're listening to this, it will have already started, because the show's going to go out on Monday morning. The race will already be underway. And we wanted to do a little bit of a look ahead to what is coming up at the Tour de France Femmes, what we can look forward to over the next week. And yeah, so Cosmo and I have some thoughts about it, but honestly, the best positioned person to give you the insight and analysis is our women's editor, Abby Mickey, who happens to be, at the moment, in Rotterdam for the women's Grand Départ, and as ever, is across all the storylines. So we sent Abby a message and said, hey, what are the storylines? Also, can anybody beat Demi Vollering? And so from Rotterdam, here's Abby Mickey with your dispatch from the Grand Départ of the Tour de France Femmes to give you, some insights from the ground and her own kind of perspective on what we can expect here coming up at the Tour de France Femmes.
Abby Mickey here, host of the Wheel Talk podcast, coming at you live from Rotterdam, the start of the Women's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. And Dane asked me to bring you a couple of the biggest storylines from the race. Definitely the start being in Rotterdam is a big storyline, especially because a lot of the top women in the peloton are Dutch. The defending champion, last year's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift winner, Demi Vollering, is Dutch. Lorena Wiebes, the best sprinter in the peloton right now, she's Dutch. Her main rival, Charlotte Kool, Dutch. Marianne Vos, second in the Olympic road race, and the GOAT, Dutch. So having the first 3 stages in the Netherlands is a big deal for them. The first 2 road stages in Rotterdam are going to be crucial stages for the sprinters. They're both pretty flat. The second stage, only 70 kilometers. And they favor the Dutch sprinters above anyone else. There will be other sprinters who will want to try to take the first couple of stages, Elisa Balsamo among them, but the Dutch definitely have the upper hand in these stages, and they will all want a win on home roads at the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, because it's not every day the Tour de France goes through your home country, unless you're French. The double day on Tuesday is going to be an interesting one with a 70-kilometer long road race in the morning and a 6.3-kilometer long time trial in the afternoon. That one's going to be an interesting day for everyone because riders don't often race a double day, and they have never raced a double day in a World Tour stage race since the formation of the World Tour. So having a double day is going to test riders' nutrition, knowledge, as well as how they cope with 2 efforts in one day spread out with a break in between. Like the last 2 years, the route builds over time. It starts with some sprint stages, and then we move into some hilly stages. The 4th stage is amazing because it includes a ton of the climbs from both Amstel Gold Race and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. The final 50 kilometers of the stage is basically Liège-Bastogne-Liège is finished, so that's pretty cool for classics riders to be able to race that, and I think that stage is pretty wide open. I would look at riders like Ruth Edwards, Kristen Faulkner, Marianne Vos, of course. Riders who are both quick in a reduced bunch and also willing to put it all on the line for a stage win. The finish being up Alpe d'Huez is a huge deal, and especially with the race starting in the Netherlands, to have the final stage finish on such an iconic climb is really kind of the cherry on top of this year's tour, and I cannot wait to see which climbers can try to rival Demi on that stage. There are 2 really hard climbs in that stage and a big break in between the 2. So they're not back to back, and it's going to be a really challenging stage, especially with the 166 kilometer stage right before it. Personally, I'm looking at a rider like Evita Music to win that stage, or at least challenge Vollering for the stage honors. She's spent a lot of time away from the peloton training and getting ready for this race. It's basically home roads for her, so it's going to be pretty cool to see her step up to the plate, especially with transfer rumors swirling around who's going to join FDJ Suez in 2025. And the announced new signing of Juliette Labousse, who's coming over from DSM Firmenich Post NL. As far as who can rival Demi Vollering, it's a great question. And I think that there are a few riders who will want to try, Vita being one of them. Also, Kasia Niewiadoma, who spent a lot of the summer at altitude getting ready for this race and only raced the Olympics before. And especially coming out of the Olympics, maybe a bit disappointed with how that went for her. I think that she'll be really excited to show what she's made of at the Tour. And she's had really successful Tours de France the last 2 years. So to not only repeat that, but expand upon what she's already done. Her teammate Chloe Dygert is back in the peloton, which is not a GC threat, but is definitely going to add a lot to the mix in terms of what Kasia can do and the team around her. I'm excited to see how Rihanna Marcus goes, second at the Vuelta behind Demi. She's a rider who's consistently worked on her riding in all aspects, an incredible time trialist, and I can't wait to see what she can do on the final 2 stages, if it's just consistently riding and kind of working her way into the podium, or if she's going to try something new to try to get a better place in the GC this year. Unfortunately, we don't have Elisa Longo-Borghini in the race, but I can't wait to see what Shirin Van Anrooy and Gaia Riolini do with her absence. The 2 of them are both incredible riders for 2 different reasons. Shirin Van Anrooy won the Tour de l'Avenir last year, and Gaia Riolini is a phenomenal climber. So for the 2 of them, without Elisa being there, it's a big opportunity for them to have some chances for themselves. We have some amazing climbers who will be really looking forward to those final stages, even if they aren't in the GC conversation. Sarah Gigante is one of them. Tour Down Under winner, all around badass. So really looking forward to seeing how the stages go for her. Neve Bradbury, of course, Kasia's teammate on Canyon SRAM. There's so many riders that took the approach of going through the Olympics to get to the Tour de France Femmes, and there are so many riders who didn't do that. And I think the split between the 2 and how the Olympics maybe went, riders like Kristen Faulkner, who's coming into the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift with a ton of confidence, Grace Brown as well, and then riders who didn't get to race the Olympics like Rihanna Marcus, who have a lot to prove this week. So it's going to be really exciting. There's going to be a ton to watch every single day, and we will be bringing you live podcasts from the ground. The Wheel Talk podcast crew is here all week. Myself, Lauren Rowney, and Tilda Price will be doing podcasts every single day with audio diaries from riders in the peloton, so you get that real peloton feel. Tune in to the Wheel Talk podcast, and thanks so much for Dane for asking me about my opinions.
All right, Cosmo. Abby pretty much summed up most of the stuff that we wanted to get to. Anything else on your mind about Tour de France Femmes, big storylines, follow, stuff that you're looking forward to?
I thought it was interesting to see a split stage. I haven't seen those in a very long time, since 91, I think. And this actually I haven't seen them in the men's race since 1991.
Yeah, right.
And this actually, it sort of mirrors the way those last tours with split stages were done, where you have a kind of opening day in a city, and then you have a split day the next day, more or less exactly what happens here in Rotterdam. So it's kind of cool to see the legacy of that play out.
Yeah, so this was an interesting wrinkle of the Tour de France Femmes this year, is that they have 8 stages squeezed into 7 days. It was interesting enough that we kind of wanted to start poking around and figure out why do this? And also, not only why, but how, because it's actually not allowed anymore at the World Tour level. You don't see World Tour races doing this anymore. You'll still see it occasionally at lower level races. You'll see split stages. And in the past, if you're an OG bike racing fan, you're very familiar with the split stage. That's something that was done quite frequently back in the day. But it's not something, as you said, it's been more than 30 years since it was done at the men's tour. And at the World Tour level in general, it hasn't been done in quite a while. They just don't do it anymore at the World Tour level. So yeah, I had a conversation on the phone with the Tour de France Femmes sporting director and also former pro, Frank Perk. And what he said was that the organizers wanted to make this an 8-stage race, but they didn't want to start the race on Sunday because of the overlap with the Olympics, the Olympic closing ceremonies, and the lack of TV exposure that they would get, TV coverage, due to the fact that the Olympics were ending. And they still wanted to end on a Sunday. They didn't want to end on a Monday, because that's just weird. Who wants to end on a Monday? You end races on Sundays. And they therefore decided to just squeeze in two stages into one day. But to do that, they needed to get approval from the UCI. So I think he had to send an official letter, and obviously Lapartien and the boss of the UCI, David Lapartien, and the ASO are friendly with one another. So he gave his approval. I think he looked closely at everything they were planning to do. And they decided to do it in Rotterdam for a bunch of reasons. I mean, this is where the big start is happening. And they decided to do it in a way that hopefully organizers are hoping that, even if you get 2 sprint winners for the first 2 stages, they get to have a different winner here with the time trial. So you kind of split up the chance of sprint, which might have happened. So yeah, that there's all that. And then the other thing that's really interesting is the sort of logistics of it. It's really heavy to have like the finish line stuff, everything at the finish line, the gantry and everything associated with the finish line. They're hard to move. So they kind of need to do them 2 finishes in basically the same place. I think they might be moving a few hundred yards or something, but it's all kind of in that same area in Rotterdam. So the finish of the time trial and the finish of the sprint stage, both very close. And therefore, they will be able to squeeze 8 stages into 7 days. More on that over at escapecollective.com. Story going up here pretty soon. Then, and Cosmo, we were talking about this before, but the interesting thing for the riders is, of course, how do you recover from that? The first effort, you take a break, and then you go back to the second effort. I mean, Abby was talking about this as well. That'll be cool to see who can handle that well or who doesn't. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I think of the thing that's probably changed the most. Maybe not the most, but since 1991, the way riders take on nutrition now is completely different, right? You've got this horribly large number of calories per hour. How does that work when you're getting off the bike, changing your clothes and racing a time trial? Like, because the time trial prep you can see people doing before these stages is very involved. Like, I would make me nervous as a racer to have to make this jump. So I'm curious to see how the teams handle it. Yeah,
and it's something that obviously, because of the fact that it doesn't show up at the World Tour level, it's just not something you see. So we don't have a whole lot to go on. So it's kind of exciting that just the idea of this new challenge, or at least an unusual challenge. And then the big,
as long as it doesn't happen too much, right? Because like that was the big deal, was this brutal for the riders. So
yeah. I mean, the idea of doing the effort of a regular Tour de France stage, once is enough. And then to do another one is oof, yeah. The other thing that obviously Abby talked about, and I think that's sort of on everyone's mind going into the races, is who can challenge Demi Vollering. And we should point out she is the clear favorite ahead of the race. But, Kasia Doma looked pretty good at the Olympics. She's a great climber. And I think as the Tour de France Femmes gets more and more really hard climbery days, we're kind of getting into uncharted territory because there are so few top-level women's races that go into the very high mountains. And this is something that's really exciting about women's racing in the past few years. We're finally getting more of that because for so long, you just didn't have that many top-tier races in that fashion. They were generally going over smaller climbs. And it's just really cool that we finally get to see women's racing at the highest level, at the Tour de France, tackling these climbs. And it's something that really exciting to see. Maybe Demi Vollering will crush everyone on these climbs, but it's cool that we get to at least see it happen and see what, whether anyone can stand up to her on Alpe d'Huez.
We're getting the Tour de France has really been kind of taking these baby steps for the women into like legit, like couple days in the mountains, right? Because we started with Planche de Belfi. It's not that big a climb. It's a big climb. It's not that big a climb. Last year we got Aspin and Tourmalet, which was amazing in the fog. And now we have 2 proper HC climbs to finish up the stage. And this comes the day after there's another hilltop-ish finish at Le Grand Bonnat. It is feeling more and more like a Tour de France. It's still 7 days. It's not the same entity, but you're seeing more of that type of successive brutality that makes the Tour de France the Tour de France.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, by the time you're listening, the race will have already rolled out from the start line, and then you'll get 7 more days, 8 total stages of action. By the time we are recording again, we will know who has won. Will it be Demi Vollering or someone else? We'll find out. In the meantime, Tour of Poland, Tour de Pologne. Interestingly enough, a pretty big star will be among the racers at the Tour de Pologne, which starts this week.
We'll see.
Jonas Vingegaard, as far as we know, on the start list, slated to race the Tour de Pologne, and worth pointing out that the 2-time Tour de France winner kind of broke through, kind of emerged at this very race. Was it back in 21 that he won a stage there, I think? And no, maybe it was even earlier than that. Let's go check it was 2019, all the way back then. I think it's his first World Tour win, maybe second, something like that. So he has a history at the Tour de Pologne, does Jonas Vingegaard. And he'll be there with, again, as far as we know, with a handful of other big names at the World Tour level. Mats Pedersen, Tim Merlier, Olav Koy. So yeah, we'll have some thoughts on how all that played out as well by the time we meet again. I think that's all we got this week, unless I'm mistaken. Cosmo, do we miss anything?
There was track and field. There's cool track cycling.
There is track cycling as well. That does happen.
I oddly feel more comfortable commentating on track and field athletics than I do on track cycling because I've actually done it competitively, albeit at a terribly low level.
Same. Technically, I did also run track in high school. Yeah.
It's the track cycling is so cool and so fast, and I have no idea what's going on most of the time. But I am told that the races were very good. So.
Yeah, rather than trying to come across as experts on the subject, I think we could just defer to those who know more. And we did have some coverage over at escapecollective.com. Kit followed it a fair bit. I know we had a couple other stories on it. And I know a bunch of records fell, as kind of always happens. Anyway, I think that's all we got this week. And when we are back next, we can talk about the Tour de France Femmes. We can talk about Tour de Pologne. The Vuelta a España is looming. Exciting times. But for now, I've been Dane Cash, and who are you, and what was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano, and that was the How the Race Was Won podcast.